that are going to ask questions, so we're going to abide by the 5 minutes. I will begin, followed by Ranking Member Raskins. This week, the Oversight Committee issued another bank subpoena targeting specific wires originating from Beijing. Most of our bank subpoenas have been for Biden family associates' accounts, resulting in thousands of pages of bank records. We've identified these bank accounts based on suspicious activity reports filed with the Treasury Department after being flagged by the banks. The bank records obtained this week show that on August 2nd, 2019, Jonathan Lee and Miss Tang Ling in Beijing sent Hunter Biden $250,000, listing Joe Biden's home address in Wilmington, Delaware. The wire stated it was for a personal investment. A second wire showed that on July 26, 2019, Miss Wang Xin sent $10,000, listing Joe Biden's home address in Wellington, Delaware. The $10,000 wire said it was a loan to beneficiary. Now let's talk about the $250,000 personal investment. Sure looks like Jonathan Lee was making a substantial investment in the Bidens months after Joe Biden announced his run for the presidency in April 2019. Now, who is Jonathan Lee? During Devin Archer's interview with the Oversight Committee, he explained how Vice President Biden developed a relationship with Jonathan Lee. Vice President Biden had coffee with Jonathan Lee in Beijing. He talked with him on the phone and even wrote a college recommendation letter for Mr. Lee's children. Hunter Biden even met with Jonathan Lee after flying on Air Force Two to Beijing with Joe Biden. The Beijing Bidens cultivated a relationship with Jonathan Lee and other Chinese nationals for one reason and one reason only: to access their wealth. As we all know, the Bidens had nothing to sell except the brand, which was Joe Biden. Hunter Biden sold the brand well, making the Biden family millions from China and elsewhere. While Joe Biden was vice president, Hunter Biden became an investor in a Chinese investment fund with Jonathan Lee and owned a percentage of BHR Partners through one of his many LLCs. This was a political problem for his dad, the big guy, who was running for president. In October 2019, 2 months after the Beijing wires, Hunter Biden's lawyer claimed he served only as a member of the board of directors in an unpaid position. This was Hunter Biden's lawyer. She was in an unpaid position. Abby Lowell now claims the money is a documented loan from a private individual. Now, these wire statements are very concerning. The Biden's defenders justify. For the money isn't consistent with what we know from the suspicious activity reports from Treasury. Mr. Dubinsky, I'm very skeptical of Abby Lowell's statement that the $250,000 payment from Jonathan Lee and another woman was a loan, because the wire states it was a personal investment. We've also reviewed documents of Treasury that don't support Mr. Lowell's theory. In your experience, are international loans of this amount supported by documentation such as loan terms, interest rates, and repayment schedule?
Yes, Mr. Okay, the networks are down, the equipment is ready, and we've crippled their supplies. Mrs. Rackman has written our check and given us the...
Absolutely. So would it be important to review Hunter Biden's bank records and see if Hunter Biden paid back the money to Jonathan Lee, or if he sent the money to someone else, I don't know, using a cashier's check, for example?
Well, as somebody mentioned earlier, it's very important to follow the money. Absolutely. And that's very important in this situation.
Thank you. Professor Turley, we all know what this payment's really for. It's for influence peddling and selling the Biden brand. Now, today we have shown that the Biden family and their companies received more than $15 million without providing any known legitimate services between 2014 and 2019. If you include the business associates and their companies, they've received over $24 million. Based on evidence we've developed so far, what are some of the potential laws we should be analyzing during our impeachment inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd actually lay out what are the most obvious potential articles of impeachment without saying that those have been established, but the ones that I recommend for the committee to focus on. And one of the things I recommend is that the committee actually start by looking at potential crimes, because I've said that in the past two impeachments, that it's an important thing to front-load criminal acts for the reasons I laid out. It gives a very high standard for impeachment, quite frankly, higher than is binding. I said in the last two impeachments, you can't impeach for non-criminal conduct. So I suggest starting there. But as I talk about in my testimony, bribery, obstruction, conspiracy, abuse of power, those have all been raised in past impeachments. Abuse of power is the article that is very, very common. It tends to be a catch-all, and it is the one that I've always been a little bit uncomfortable with. It's why I suggest you end there rather than start there, because that's the article that brings in a lot of non-criminal conduct, and frankly, I think that you need to focus as much as you can on the evidence and whether you can establish these connections.
Very good. Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Raskins of Maryland for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Gerhardt,
No.
well, why did the Office of Legal Counsel opine that there must be a vote of the full House?
Hey, how can I help?
Before a committee launches into
No problem. It's on its way.
Why did Speaker McCarthy insist on it and in fact say that there would be one in this case?
I think the Office of Legal Counsel said that, at least in part, because an impeachment inquiry is deadly serious. It is, again, just about the most serious thing any House committee ever undertakes. And one safeguard against the committee acting on the basis of just, let's say, the party membership is to ensure that the full House is behind the impeachment inquiry.
A dozen of our colleagues on the Republican side have already called for impeachment. I'm struck by the fact that of the 4 expert witnesses brought together today, not a single one of them argued that a sufficient quantum of evidence exists today to justify the impeachment of President Biden. Is there any precedent in our country for launching an impeachment inquiry absent evidence of wrongdoing by the president?
No. And in fact, I would just point out that Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton and President Trump in 2019, the full House authorized those impeachment inquiries.
Lev Parnas sent us a letter in which he said, addressed to Chairman Cuomo, in which he said, the narrative you are seeking for this investigation has been proven false many times over by a wide array of respected sources. There is simply no merit to investigating this matter any further, and he says, please abandon this effort to investigate the Bidens, which is nothing more than a wild goose chase. And he was Rudy Giuliani's right-hand man, gallivanting all over the world to try to put together a case back in 2019 that Joe Biden had done something wrong. Do you agree that, given that the evidence we've looked at over the 8 months comes down to this discredited Weazel conspiracy theory, we should hear from those responsible for concocting the story in the first case, in the first place, specifically Lev Parnas and Rudy Giuliani?
Absolutely.
What do you think about the fact that the very first act of the committee in its impeachment investigation was to reject the idea of subpoenaing Lev Parnas and Rudy Giuliani, who are at the heart of the story that's the basis for impeachment?
I think if there's going to be an investigation into the president, all the evidence, that is to say,
we have lots of colleagues on this committee and off the committee who've called for the impeachment of Joe Biden, who also voted against impeaching Donald Trump for inciting a violent insurrection.
That was no fucking insurrection. That was a false fucking flag by Nancy Pelosi. Y'all keep saying some fucking insurrection bullshit.
Against the union. And hundreds of people have gone to jail in subsidiary acts under the umbrella of that insurrectionary process. Now, can you come up with a theory that it would allow someone to say, I am going to vote to impeach Joe Biden for offenses unstated and evidence unknown, but I will oppose and vote against the impeachment of Donald Trump for inciting a violent insurrection against the union, which is something that concurrent bipartisan majorities voted for in the House and the Senate.
I cannot, and I might just add as a law professor,
Fuck about you being no legal lying lawyer, fucking professor.
in trying to assess the constitutionality of any governmental action is to take the names out. switch the names or switch the political parties and see if the outcome is the same.
So if Joe Biden incited a violent insurrection against the Union and said, you go and fight like hell, and if you don't, you won't have a country anymore, would you consider that in the ensuing mayhem and chaos
Absolutely.
to be an impeachable event?
Absolutely.
Or not? To your mind, in applying the law to the facts, have you seen any evidence that Joe Biden has done anything remotely comparable to what Donald Trump did, which earned him his impeachment in the bipartisan vote of the House?
I have not. I also just might add, with all due respect.
Man, shut the fucking all due respect bullshit. It's all disrespect. Lying piece of shit.
I don't know who's being referenced when people talk about the Biden family.
Thank you, Professor Gerhardt. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for unanimous consent to introduce Lev Parnas' July 18, 2023 letter to you and to me and the rest of the committee into the official record of this proceeding.
Without objection to order, Chair now recognizes the Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith from Missouri, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's amazing to be sitting in your committee. It's a pleasure to be here. Yesterday we had a committee release over 700 pages of documents that came from the 2 IRS whistleblowers based on the last oversight hearing when they presented before this committee, where members, both Republican and Democrat, asked for additional information, and they provided. Actually mentioned Trump a whole lot more than they ever mentioned Biden. And it's happening over here too, so I think it's kind of consistent both in the Ways and Means Committee and in the Oversight Committee. But Ms. Connor, my question is yesterday, the Ways and Means Committee voted to release additional information provided, like I said, by Gary Shapley and Mr. Ziegler. One of the documents shows that Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf ordered investigators not to pursue leads into possible campaign finance violations. We know that over $2 million of Hunter Biden's tax liabilities were paid off by a big Democrat Party donor and Hollywood lawyer who's named Kevin Morris. James Biden, the president's brother, told investigators he did not know how Hunter Biden even knew this individual, but was later asked to thank him for the payment, quote, on behalf of the family. The Biden family. The family. So how would such payments that essentially pushed under the rug the president's son's tax problems, at least for 1 year, be considered a campaign finance violation on part of the Biden campaign?
Thank you for the question.